everybody. Happy Sunday. I hope everybody's doing really great. Welcome back. I am Gina from Advantage College Planning, and tonight we are going to be talking about letters of recommendation. It is that time. So college is coming up, college applications are coming. And so for anyone who has a current high school junior, now is the time to start thinking about what's to come with that application process. And part of that does involve asking for letters of recommendation. So I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. If you are new here, I hop on about every other week or so with relevant information about the college application process, giving you some tips and advice to help guide you through. And it's always really helpful for me to know what year your students are and where you're tuning in from. That's helpful for me to know just so I can make sure I'm giving you information that's most relevant to kind of where you're at this point with your students. So you can use the chat feature to let me know what year your students are, if you can hear me okay, yeah, anything like that, what area you're located in, anything like that is always really helpful. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm excited tonight to talk about this and to talk about letters of recommendation. It's a topic that comes up every year, and so it is a really important part of the application process. So let's talk about that. When you're starting to visit college campuses, okay, so we've got a mix. We've got some juniors, 10th graders, awesome. So when you start to visit college campuses, and you're going to potentially get an information session from the college sometimes before you go out on tour. And a lot of times in that information session, you'll hear the college representative or the admissions counselor who's doing the session say, we use a holistic application review at our school. And so what that means is they are considering all these different aspects of the application when they're choosing to make an admissions decision. So they're looking at your students' grades, they're looking at their test scores if they submit them, but they're also looking at these more qualitative pieces of information, not just the numbers. And essays, activities, and letters of recommendation fall into that. So letters of recommendation are one way that the college gets a really good sense of who your student is as a person. They get a good idea of who they are academically from the grades that they've earned, the classes that they've taken, the level of rigor of those classes, again, test scores if they submit them. That's telling the college, does the student have the academic skills and previous experience academically to come into our university and really hit the ground running with the level of rigor that we know they're going to hit at our university or in the specific major they've applied to. And if that's all that colleges were using to admit students, it'd be a very straightforward process. But that also wouldn't be holistic. So really what colleges then have to do is say, okay, here are all the students who meet our academic criteria, right? They've kind of made it through phase one of our review. But now, who are these people? Colleges are building communities. Some of these colleges are the size of small cities, right? So whether they're big or small, though, they're building a community of people who are going to live and learn in this place for 4 years. And that's really going to shape the experience that all of the students have collectively based on the individual members of that community, right? So letters of recommendation really can in the best of times, can convey to a college admissions office what really sets the student apart, what makes them tick in an academic setting, what kind of character qualities do you see in this student, and who is he or she going to be as a member of our community. We know how they're going to fare. We can kind of estimate how they'll fare on their tests and their essays. But what we now need to know is, what kind of classmate are they going to be? What kind of roommate and community member are they going to be? And how will they contribute to the ecosystem of our college campus? That's really what colleges are looking for in those letters of recommendation. So oftentimes students and parents will ask me how many letters of recommendation they need, and it really does depend on the schools that they're applying to. When the students are submitting their applications, each school has their own requirements. Some schools do not accept letters of recommendation. There is no place to even submit them. It's just, they don't want them. They're not reading them. It's not something they consider. But most schools do want at least one letter of recommendation. Many schools will say one letter is recommended, 0 letters are required, or one letter is required, up to 3 are optional, right? So going into application season, I like to make sure my students are prepared and we have our bases covered. So my general line of advice is let's try to find 2 academic letter writers and 1 other letter writer. Because typically in the application process, if I'm looking at the average of what students have the option to submit, that should cover our bases. So let's start with the academic. Academic recommenders are going to be a junior year teacher who taught your student in a core academic class. So math, history, English, science, and world language. Those are your 5. So the first thing we're looking for are 2 of those 5 from junior year that we could choose from. And we're going to get into kind of how to ask, kind of the nitty gritty of that and kind of who to ask. But those 5, we're going to pick 2. Okay. We're going to get into the details in a minute. Then for your other recommender, that's your 1, that is other. So that could be anybody who's not this, right? That could be a coach, a boss, an advisor for a club that your student is really seriously involved in, an arts teacher, or a computer teacher, or one of those other elective teachers, like a CTE class teacher. If your student has gotten really close with them and that's really their area of passion, that's great. Some students are really involved with band or with theater. So the directors of those programs could be really great to ask. Some students are really involved with their church. So maybe, a leader from their church or a youth group leader could be a good letter of other recommender that you can add. So that one's kind of open. So when you're thinking about the letters of recommendation, you've got the 2 from your academic and your 1 other. And what you're trying to do is cover a wide range of the different aspects of who your student is, right? So if you zoom back out and now put yourself in the position of a college admissions officer reading all these applications, when you're reviewing the students' applications, and they review them pretty quickly, with each page that you're flipping through, or actually now it's on a screen. So with each screen you're clicking through, you're really hoping to learn something new about the student with each part of their application that you go through, because that's helping you get a really well-rounded picture of who this student is and how they could contribute to a community. And so sometimes when I used to review applications, I would see, oh, I've got 2 or 3 letters of recommendation. Great. But then I'd get into the student's file and I'd see, maybe a lot of their activities were focused on leadership. And then their essay was all about how they've grown as a leader. And then all of their letters of recommendation talked about what a great leader they are. Leadership is a wonderful quality. But that was a missed opportunity for that student, because the only character trait that I learned about that student from their entire application was that they're a really strong leader. Again, that's not a bad thing, but maybe there were other areas that could have been highlighted that would have helped me know a bit more about that student and help that student stand out to me more, right? Maybe that student is a great leader, but they're also a really good team player. Maybe that student also has a wicked sense of humor. Maybe that student is also incredibly curious, intellectually curious, right? So, but I didn't get to know any of that. It's a missed opportunity. So those are some of the things that really, when we're thinking about which teachers to ask, we really want to think about, what could these people say about you and what different parts of you could they highlight? And that's really where the beauty, to me, of the other recommender comes in, right? Because you've got these 2 academic recommenders who are going to be talking about who you are as a student in the ecosystem of their classroom. But this other recommender is probably getting to know your student in a completely different way, which is amazing, right? That's a great opportunity to show a different side of the student. Now, when students are thinking about, again, which teachers to ask, some students have an embarrassment of riches, right? Maybe they could ask any of their teachers. All of their teachers, they are fabulous. They have great relationships with all their teachers. So then it's a matter of like, well, which one do we ask, right? In those situations, if your student has lots of options, the world is their oyster, then I would say let's differentiate who you're asking. Again, let's try to give different sides of you. So beyond the character qualities, let's say your student is applying to a school for a STEM major. Let's say they want to go for engineering. Okay. I would recommend we get the calc teacher, right? Let's get their recommendation, or we get the physics teacher recommendation. But then let's also get the history or English teacher's recommendation. I know you could do chem and calc, but those schools that are very STEM focused are very used to getting the chem and the calculus, or the physics and the STEM type of teachers, because students maybe who are applying to those programs are strong in the STEM fields. So of course they're going to get those letters. What's much less common is a student who has a really strong presence in her calculus class, who also has a really strong presence in her English class. That's cool. That will stand out, right? So these are the things that we need to start thinking about in differentiating what can the college learn about you from these opportunities. So when and how you ask really matters in this process. And that's why I'm doing this session on April 21st. It might seem a little bit early for juniors to be asking. It's a little early, but it's not that early. So one of the big mistakes that some students will make is they will wait and they will not ask any teachers anything until they come back senior year. There's a couple of reasons why that's a mistake. Number one, we all know that there are situations where the student leaves, comes back the next year, and the beloved teacher is gone. They transferred, they retired, whatever. And now that teacher is no longer an option, and that student was really counting on that. Now we're in a scramble. Second reason is because teachers are often, just like all the rest of us, limited in their capacity. And many teachers will say, I know that I can only write X number of recommendations. That is all I'm signing up for. That is my limit to my bandwidth. And so the students who ask early are the ones who actually can get the teacher to write the rec. Third reason why it's a mistake is because put yourself now, put on your teacher hat and pretend you're a recommender. If a student asks you for a letter of recommendation a month or two after you've had them, maybe that you had them first semester, you have them right now in your class second semester, it's really easy to write about them. It's fresh. If the student waits until senior year, a whole summer has gone by. Now I've got a new roster of students I'm trying to learn, and now I'm trying to remember something really significant about this student that I taught 6 months ago. It's not great. So we want to ask teachers for letters of recommendation, usually starting around like mid-May. I tell students right around the end of AP exams. It's usually a good time to start having those conversations and asking teachers if they would be willing to write you a letter of recommendation. How you ask also matters. So I recommend that it's a two-part process. First, students should ask in person. They should go before class or after class, not in the middle of class. We're not going to raise our hand and ask that, obviously, but also that they should go by themselves. They shouldn't go with a pack of their friends. It's just, this should be a professional conversation. It does not have to be a long conversation, but they should go up to the teacher and say, hi, Mr. So-and-so, I've really enjoyed being in your class this semester. As you know, I'll be applying to college next year. I was wondering if you'd be able to write me a letter of recommendation, like a sentence, right? And then the teacher hopefully will say, of course, I would love to. Great. That's step one. Step two is then the student has to follow up. So some teachers are going to say, here is my process. I have a Google form that you have to fill out, or send me your brag sheet, or send me a copy of your resume. So whatever the teacher tells them to do, they have to follow that step. But I also recommend that all of my students follow up on that yes with an email. And in that email, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, thank you so much for agreeing to write me a letter of recommendation. And then we're going to give the teacher some positive feedback. We're going to tell the teacher some things we really appreciate about them, right? What did you learn from them this year? How did they impact you? What did you really like about their teaching style or about their class? You're asking them, student, to write you a letter about why you're awesome and ready for college. And you're presumably asking this teacher because you feel like they know you pretty well. So it only makes sense that you would give them a little bit of warm fuzzies back, right? So start out with that, give them some positive feedback. Then in your next paragraph, that's really where the magic happens. And that's where you want to think about, okay, what are each of these three different opportunities? What picture do you want painted about you by each of these teachers? And you kind of craft a paragraph saying, I hope that you're going to remember me as a student who this, or, one thing I'm really proud of in your class was this, right? That's going to give the teacher, number one, something to go off of when they sit down and they have all these letters to write in the summer. But number two, that's really going to ensure that your letter is going to be unique and specific to you, and that your three letters will focus on three different things. You won't get three letters all about your leadership. And then you'll end it by saying, giving them the protocol. So typically, once the student adds a college to their Common Application account and adds the teacher as a recommender, then the teacher will get an email saying, upload your letter for the student. Now, some students in private schools will have a little bit of a different process. They might use SCORE or Naviance. So if you're at a private school, or if your school does use SCORE or Naviance or Slate or one of these type of third-party programs in regards to the college process, then it would be best for your student to talk to their school counselor, just so they know exactly how the process will go for uploading letters of rec. But if your student is at like a public school in Wake County, they're going to add the teacher to their Common App. The teacher's going to get an email, and it's all done digitally. So the student won't see the letter of rec, and it'll just go right into the college. So that's how that works. So mistakes to avoid. First one is definitely waiting too late. Do not wait until senior year to ask. But another really common mistake that students will make is they think that the prestige of the person writing the letter, or the perceived prestige, or this person is a really good writer, so I should ask them even though maybe they don't really know me, or this teacher has a PhD from pick a super fancy school, right? The college doesn't care. It doesn't matter. So the level of prestige of the writer doesn't really have an impact on how the student's application is going to be read. What matters is how well does the person know the student, and what are they saying about the student? Because if you have somebody who's seems very fancy on paper writing a letter, but they don't know the student at all, then it's just kind of like a neutral, okay, like check the box, you have a letter, right? So it's less about the quality of the person who is writing the letter and more about what they have to say about your student. Because at the end of the day, your student's the one applying. So that's the information that colleges want to know about. One question I always get from parents when I'm talking about letters of recommendation is, this is all well and good, but my student is very introverted, or my student goes to a huge high school and they don't know any of their teachers and their teachers don't know them. So now what do we do? You're going to be fine. The introverts will be fine. So if for whatever reason your student hasn't really connected with any of their teachers, maybe they're on virtual school, maybe they attend a big school, whatever, it's fine. So first and foremost, teachers are kind of expecting to be asked to write a letter of recommendation in some capacity, right? Maybe they're not assuming, every single one is not going to assume that your student is going to ask them, but like they know letters of recommendation are part of the college process. They know they're going to get asked by at least some students. So that's not going to be something that they're thrown off by, regardless of how well they know your student. I would say first thing, we are in April. Realistically, your student has until the end of the school year to get this ask in. So if your student has an opportunity to start connecting with a teacher, asking more questions in class, going to, office hours, smart lunch, whatever it's called, just to make a connection and get some feedback on a paper or a test between now and the end of the year, now is a good time to push themselves out of their comfort zone and go and do that. That's also going to be a huge strength, that they've had experience doing that when they get to college. So I would definitely recommend use the time you have left to push yourself out of your comfort zone and start to make those connections. But the other thing too is that students, when they're asking teachers, especially if a teacher doesn't really know a student very well, they're going to ask for information. They're going to ask for a brag sheet. They're going to ask for a copy of their resume. They'll ask for something. And if not, the student's going to send them the email. So worst case scenario, the work goes back to the student. What do you think you have demonstrated in this classroom? Why are you asking this teacher? What are you most proud of in this class? Highlight the things that you're most proud of. And if the teacher agreed to write you a letter, then they're going to use that information. I'd also say for my introverts or for my students who are at these bigger schools, or I have worked with students who, they do kind of like an online virtual school or a homeschool with like a virtual program and different situations like that. It is a little bit harder to get those academic recommenders to know you really well, but then that's where that other recommender is clutch, because that's when, okay, maybe your boss at Chick-fil-A who's promoted you twice knows you really well. That person can write a great letter of recommendation that maybe fills in some of the gaps that your academic recommender might not be able to write. So those are some things to think about is, use the other recommender, really make sure you've got somebody who can speak, very clearly about who you are. So that also leads me into like underclassmen plan ahead. So I saw that we had a few parents of sophomores on here, which is really great. Or if any of you 11th grade parents have younger students, plan ahead, guys. I start talking with my students in 10th grade, in ninth grade, like, hey, how are you making connections with teachers? What do you think your teachers could say about you? What are you most proud of after first semester, after second semester? Just kind of getting them in the habit of thinking, these are going to be the teachers you have to ask for letters of rec junior year. And if you've never built these skills, it's kind of hard. So, anybody who's younger and getting ready to go into junior year, really go into it planning ahead. So bottom line is you will need to be prepared. I recommend having 3 letters of recommendation, 2 core academic teachers from junior year, 1 other. You should be asking around mid to late May, and the more work the student can do and up front asking for a really specific letter, the better the letter is going to be and better serve their application and strengthen their application when it comes time for it to be reviewed in the application process. So I'm going to open up for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the comments. If you found this really helpful, I have a lot of other Facebook Live videos. They all get recorded and they live here on our Facebook page. You can go back and watch them anytime. We also have great resources on our website, advcp.com. We have a fantastic blog and podcast, all kinds of great resources. And of course, if we were already working together, then your students are getting a lot of this information from us as well during our one-on-one meetings. You can definitely reach out with questions. So I will be back on May 19th. So I'll take a little bit of a break. So I have a conference. We've got Mother's Day in there. May is kind of a crazy month, but I'll be back on the 19th and I'm going to be on at 7. So this is going to be a shift. I normally have started these at 8, but Facebook Lives moving forward will need to start at 7. So I'm going to be on at 7 o'clock on May 19th, and we're going to be talking about balancing a college list. So for all of my juniors, rising seniors, but younger students as well, it's a good thing to think about. How do you know if your college list is balanced? What does that even mean? How do you make a good college list? Awesome. Great. Well, great. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Have a good one. Bye.